Welcome to another edition of the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. I'm Don Grodoff. Along with my wife Gina, we have a practice called Focused Healthy Family, helping families get past the behavior and anxiety issues naturally. We also produce the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast, where we are advocates for our own family and others dealing with OCD and anxiety. In the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast, we do interviews, provide resources, and information for treatment and support of OCD recovery. We also want to hear from you, your comments, and if you want to tell your story, we want to put it up on the podcast on our Stories from the OCD side.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Q Sciences. Don and I discovered that the supplements we were taking and giving to our children were not being absorbed properly. I was very excited when I found Q Sciences. I was impressed with the quality of the products and that they provide maximum absorption. They have a variety of products, including a Q Max product, which is a combination of 3 products, including vitamins, minerals, and a probiotic. They also have hemp oil, a vitamin B12 spray, a sleep spray, and kids products. I've really seen a difference in how these products are improving how I feel, improving my mental health, and I'm happy with the quality of these products and how they're helping our whole family. If you'd like to learn more,
simply go to qsciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com. That's the letter Q, sciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com, or visit invisiblewheelchair.com and find out more information there.
and stop throwing your money away on supplements that don't work and use a quality product like Q Sciences.
Now, let's get to that podcast. The following is an interview Gina and I did with Brian Teller, the host of Conquering Everest podcast. So let's listen to that interview now.
Don and Gina, welcome to the Conquering Everest podcast.
Thank you. It's neat to be here.
It is.
You guys, this will be the topic that we're going to be talking about today is the first time that I've had anyone on the show to talk about this topic, but I know it definitely affects a lot of families and people. So I can't wait to kind of dig in and get your insights and your experience. But before we get there, let's take a moment and just let the viewers and our listeners know a little bit about who Don and Gina are.
Well, we're the parents of 3 kids. I'm an occupational therapist and have worked in adult and geriatric rehab for 28 years.
Myself, I'm Don, and I also have 3 kids. It's amazing. We have,
How that works.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how that works. But I'm an alternative practitioner. I'm an EFT or emotional freedom techniques practitioner, tapping practitioner, and I've been tapping for almost 20 years now. And then in practice, I actually went through the whole training of it in practice for over 9 years now.
Okay.
And we both, in our practice, it's called Focused Healthy Family. We work with parents and families that are going through kind of some of what we went through with the OCD, but just even with anxiety or, just behavior issues, things like that, helping them to get through it and kind of come back together as a family.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about your experience with that. You actually, one of your children did suffer from, I guess suffer's the right word, from OCD. What was that like for you guys, for your family?
We actually have both our daughters have suffered with obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yeah.
But the first one,
that was the tough one.
It was. She was 8 years old when these little weird symptoms, which we didn't realize what was going on, kind of snowballed into this mess of fear and
anxiety,
anger, and pretty much her personality changed almost overnight. She was this easy, carefree kid. Her brother was kind of the rigid, regimented kid. I had a friend who she was over washing her hands for probably a good year before the severe onset. And a friend who has OCD said, this could be OCD. And I remember thinking, no, Harrison's the organized, the rigid one. It's kind of that stereotype that's out there that OCD means you want things neat, you're organized, you're anal, which is not really what the disorder is. And we found that out, unfortunately, the hard way.
Very hard way. In fact, we just did a podcast where we talked about this, and we talked about one of the nights that I remembered especially, where it really kind of, I guess, took off, where, and it was a typical Saturday night. And my daughter had a friend over for a sleepover. Her friend had been there for about half the day, I guess. And they just having fun. You could hear them up in the room giggling and laughing and doing typical, sleepover girl things, And about 9 o'clock, she stepped into the bathroom to go to the bathroom. Something happened, and she came out this frightened, anxious, little girl that couldn't enter her bedroom again because it was dirty. And I use those in quotation marks because if you know our house, especially now we have 2 dogs and 3 cats, even though we didn't really have that then, but it was a typical house. It was dirty.
And her fears weren't about actual dirt.
Yeah.
It was sort of this imaginary, it's been contaminated.
Yeah.
And she kind of came to me quietly, and she's like, I can't go in my room. And I'm like, what's going on? Because we didn't realize what was, really going on with her. And she's like, I can't step in my room.
Well, and she was extremely upset because her friend was still in the room, and she didn't know how we were going to get her out of there safely. And Gina, I remember, went around the house collecting up rugs, little throw rugs. And we had to make a rug pathway to her bed, and to get her friend out and to get her to bed.
I remember making it a game because she wasn't going to step on a hardwood floor of like, here's some lily pads in the water or whatever, and trying to make light of it, to not alarm her friend and for her not to be too embarrassed. And somehow we got through that night, and yet it was kind of a snowball from there of things just.
Yeah, I mean, that night we just thought, she probably was off. She wasn't feeling good. Something was, like that. But it was, I remember too, also about 2 weeks later, I walked in her room, I think it was like 10 o'clock at night, and my pants leg touched her bedspread, and she went ballistic. She wanted the whole room. First, she wanted the whole room, like, I think, burned or us to clean, get the Clorox out and clean everything. And of course, I didn't handle that well. I was like, there's no way. It's 11 o'clock, whatever time it was. And it led into about a 4-hour battle, where she went into our bathroom and washed her hands for hours and made just a total mess of flooded the bathroom, soap, and tore things and did all kinds of stuff. She was just rampaging.
In those early days, we knew she was over cleaning and washing and felt like things were dirty or contaminated, but we didn't really understand why. She wasn't talking a lot about, the reasons and what was going on behind things. And so we kind of, and night times were really tough. She would resist sleep, and anyone who's got anxiety issues at night, it just ruminates in her brain. And with obsessive compulsive disorder, there's obsessive thoughts. And so it just ramps up at night. You're laying there, it's dark, it's quiet, your mind's not busy with other things. And it would just ramp up, and she'd resist sleep. And there was a stretch of time where we just watched, this was before streaming TV, sat and watched old rerun shows. I think she's seen every Golden Girl episode and every
Cheers. It was like,
because until she like passed out from fatigue at like 3 or 4 in the morning,
and then wake up screaming at 6 in the morning.
And wake up and just be still in that state of panic or anger.
It was probably the toughest time, I think, in my life, because it was just so stressful.
and her younger sister was a year old at the time, and her older brother was 12, and her rage got such that she didn't want him doing things, her older brother, and it affected their relationship, and he kind of had to fend for himself. All our attention was going to help her figuring out what was going on, as we started to look for help and resources for her. And
it was and she took it out a lot on me too. It seemed like I was a kind of a target for her to tear, to even physically to
swinging at you, hitting at you. Yeah.
So
now, when that manifested with her, did you guys realize that it was OCD pretty quickly, or was that kind of a foreign topic for you? You're like, what's going on? I don't understand.
Well, my friend had suggested it when she was about 7. And as an occupational therapist, I did have training in mental health. So understanding of the basic disorders and things. And so when it got that bad, I realized that's probably what it was, from that background, I believe, that I had, and from talking with my friend. We weren't quick to label it, though. I didn't want to label her. I wanted to try all kinds of alternative things, change her diet to get some help for her. And in the long run, I realized that was a disservice to her, that because someone with OCD, they realize that these compulsions that they have don't make sense. And yet their brain is stuck on this loop that they have to do these behaviors, these compulsions, or something bad is going to happen. And so when we finally labeled it, it helped her realize, this isn't her fault. It's not, she's not out of her mind, or, it's.
And it feels that way, though. And,
yeah. And to help understand that this is what she's going through. It's not who she is. It's, it's an illness, just like any other kind of illness that she's struggling with, that her brain is kind of malfunctioning in this loop. And
crazy stuff, and, very illogical, the things that she thought and believed, example, and I found this out much later, what was going on. But at the time, what was happening is, we'd come into the bathroom and find this pile of toilet paper in the trash. I mean, a stack of it. And she would unravel the toilet paper like crazy and rip it off, throw it away before she would start using it. And later on, some years later, she finally was able to tell me what was going on. Her belief was that, you got to understand, our bathrooms are second level, where we have a 2-story house. She believed with her whole heart that somebody came into a screened in.
Or someone might have,
yeah.
The possibility existed that someone came in and poisoned the toilet paper, poisoned her toothbrush, poisoned a number of things. So she felt like she had to do these behaviors and clear out the toilet paper, had to cover her toothbrush and all these things to protect these things. And with OCD, someone has either an irrational thought or a rational thought that's taken to an irrational level. And that they have to engage in different compulsive behaviors or avoiding behaviors to prevent something terrible from happening. And it's hard on anybody. And for a child, it's really challenging. Yeah. Challenging is for the parents to figure out what's going on.
Well, and I'd like to just ask you guys on the parent side of things, because I've known parents that have children with extreme anxiety. And I know it's easy for a parent, you try all these different things, you try to make sense of it, and then you find yourself exhausted going to bed at night and feeling kind of guilty because, maybe, you try to shift away from the, just calm down, just relax. But then you feel guilty because you're not doing everything you can, and you're not sure what's going on. Did you guys face that, or you're just kind of going to bed?
Yeah. Well, like we said, and when she was really flared up she couldn't go to sleep, it was very exhausting and draining and taking all of our energy. And we had 2 other kids to take care of too. And we did wonder, what is this? Why is this happening? What's going on here?
Well, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing the wrong thing? Are we doing too much, too little? All those questions bombarded us. I mean, and then you walk on, we we called it walking on eggshells. You were constantly.
Because one minute she could seem fine and everything's going okay, and then something would happen, usually unknown to us, that would set her off and set her into this panic and this fear. And so you were always kind of worried about that happening and anxious. And
oh yeah, I used to, if it was like 9 o'clock and we're getting ready for bed and we hadn't had any kind of incidences, I would like, oh, we're gonna make it to bedtime without anything. And sure enough, something would trigger, and it would, off the chart.
How did it impact her brother and sister? Did they become kind of standoffish, or?
So her and her older brother were pretty close. We homeschool our kids, so they've been used to being together, doing activities together. And, her fears and things were, she would literally try to stop her brother from leaving the house and going off and doing things for himself. So it definitely interfered with their relationship.
It got a little jumpy around her too, because she could have some times of, roughing with them, hitting them or something.
Right.
So he got a little bit triggered, didn't really want to be around her.
Yeah. So there was definitely a lot of anger and tension there. Our younger sister being just over a year old, we really feel she has some post-traumatic stress disorder from this experience at such a young age, to have her older sister suddenly kind of flip out and just change her personality and be screaming and throwing things. And she's a petite young woman now, but she was then too at 8, but yet, she could throw a chair and powerful. Just be angry and yelling and screaming.
And come in at 2 o'clock in the morning and scream in our bedroom or something, and wake the youngest one up with the kind of a startle that would, I'm sure affected her in anger and stress and everything.
Yeah, I remember, I guess in the middle of things, when things were really rough, watching like old videos or looking at pictures of when the two of them were younger, and just seeing how we did things together and how much fun we had. And I just remember thinking, what happened? What did we do wrong? Where did that go? We had this, this great family dynamic, and we had fun together. And I remember for the longest time, dinners were just awful, because it was just a tough time of night and trying to get everybody eat dinner and then getting ready for bed. And it was just miserable.
Well, yeah, the whole time in the back of your mind, you're just like, what's going to explode? What do I have to watch out for? Can we, and all it? I kind of talk about, sometimes, because I used to, I was working kind of out of Charlotte, where we live. Had to drive I'm trying to remember, it was probably about an hour, 2 hours work. I was contracting with somebody, and invariably it would take a lot just to get out, and there's another whole story there, but I would get these calls like halfway to where I was going, and she'd be screaming in the phone at me, come back here now, we want you here now. And I just it kind of felt like my brain was split in half. Half of it was trying to work, trying to be productive. The other half was worried about her and the youngest one, and are they safe? Are they gonna, what's going on? Is it gonna, so it was that was, like I said, it was mentally, it was just draining.
And she did it to either of us. Like her older brother, I would take him out to a homeschool co-op, and then we'd have some time together, and we'd go work out at the Y, and I'd get these calls from her, you got to come home right now, and just angry and demanding. And when she was in that kind of place of rage, you looked at her and her eyes were like, it's like she wasn't there. There was just something really off, and it didn't kind of matter at that point what you said.
Yeah.
There was no reasoning with her about it. There was no, doing things to calm and settle her when she'd gotten to that point of anxiety. It was
you just had to kind of protect yourself and try to keep her safe too.
I mean, it wasn't a continuous
fit
of rage, but it was more demanding things happen. It was being stuck in the bathroom for hours. I mean, she took a shower one time for it was over 2 hours because the hot water ran out, and she's standing there cold and wet in the bathroom. It's like, well, you got to wait till the water comes back on. It didn't get enough hot water. just, thinking back, just how crazy it was. And yet it was kind of our normal life for the longest time.
And we're still sane. We're still here.
And so for you guys with working with your daughter, and you said your younger daughter also suffered, but was that kind of after, like, I guess where I'm getting at with this question is, I imagine at the first there's a lot of confusion. You're not sure what to do. You're trying this, you're trying that. But then eventually there was a turning point, and you guys started to understand more. You had the tools and the resources to help her.
Mm-hmm.
Was your younger daughter were you guys ready to get more experience with the younger daughter, or was it like?
Well,
I'm sorry, just the ready.
Yeah.
You're never ready, I guess.
I remember the first night our second daughter, she had a kind of a meltdown, breakdown, whatever you want to call it, where she woke up with her stuffed animals. She was worried about, and she went into the bathroom and started doing this almost the same thing that my daughter. And I remember going, "Oh my God, I can't do this again," And so yeah, ready.
Yeah. Well, we had found a great therapist for our older daughter from the International OCD Foundation. That's a great resource. They have a website, iocdf.org. Found a therapist locally that took our insurance that specialized in OCD, which is what you really need when dealing with that. And had been going to her, and it was usually me taking her, and so our youngest was there with us. And I mean, probably by age 2, we were seeing things in the younger child. And I remember talking with the therapist because it was kind of like, is she just copying her sister or is this really OCD? And, with a young child, it's hard to know. She grew up with this in the house, and is this just copying behavior? And we wondered for a long time. And she had some other symptoms that I've looked up and were typical of OCD with real young children. And you'd think, after going through it with her, and one thing I realized was I wish we had gotten help sooner when she was showing these weird fears and other behaviors the whole year before. Getting help sooner is better before it gets to the extreme point. There's mild and moderate forms of OCD. It doesn't have to be severe. And we'll never know whether that would have made a difference. But I always thought with the younger child, okay, we're going to get help early. And we started reaching out to people, and she started going to the same therapist. And
well, we kind of thought, we know what to do now. By
that time, we had done a lot of research, a lot of learning. We were not yet working with other families. But
the problem with it was, though, that OCD is one that shows itself in so many different formats, I guess you'd say. It might be a way. I mean, all basically the same principle. It's the obsessive thoughts and the compulsions that they try to follow. But with our second one, I can remember going, "Oh well, we know the tools. We know how to. We can just start working with the tools right away, and we should be able to." My way was saying, nip it in the bud now. But. Right. But it showed itself in such a different way.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go into what that way was, but it was a very personal way. But it was different than what my daughter went through. So shaping what we learned, the tools, it's still, we're still trying to, having some issues with it and trying to work with it. But we had to reshape those tools differently to fit a different type of, a way of showing it.
Well, and, different personalities, you can't parent every child the same way because they're different. They have different strengths and weaknesses. And like with the OCD and any anxiety disorder, it manifests differently, even if it looks similar at times. And so, despite our knowledge and having been through this,
now we don't want a third time, so we're learning good. We're done with learning. No,
and getting the help is challenging. There are resources and things out there because one cause of OCD is pediatric autoimmune dysfunction can trigger OCD. There's a great clinic here in Charlotte for it, but it's completely out of pocket. So the expense is just the average person can't afford it.
Well, it's $1,000 for the initial visit
just an
alone.
Initial consultation.
That's just the initial consult.
And and there is a limited number of therapists who specialize in OCD, and some of them don't take insurance, or they only take certain insurances. So,
well, I guess that's kind of why I know for myself and for us to help people kind of coach them. We can at least coach them. We're not trained in the therapy, but we've been through it so many times that we can help people at least know a direction to go.
Yeah, there's some great books and resources out there. There's a workbook for kids we got for our second daughter, using those tools with her. It can be isolating to, figure out what this is. We took her to professionals to be assessed. We took her from a pretty young age. I took her to a psychologist when she was 5, the younger one. And she wanted to do all these tests and assessments on her. And she also has some extreme social anxiety. And she didn't know this therapist, and she wouldn't complete all her tests. And so and then we took her to a developmental pediatrician. And because she didn't have physical delays or intellectual delays, she's like, oh, I can't work with her. But she had social delays. She had things that interfered with her social functioning. And so just trying to get the help you needed, so you're feeling really
lost.
Lost.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm a health professional and I'm struggling to find resources for things. You can only imagine people who really have no clue. There's so many kids out there that get labeled with behavior disorders and things, and you don't know what's going on. OCD is more prevalent than we realize.
Well, yeah, and the podcast I started because of the first daughter is called Invisible Wheelchair, and reason for that is because if there's no physical presence with this, there's nothing, they don't have a big, something on the side of their head or whatever that shows it. And a lot of
times the behaviors, they kind of keep it in check when they're out in public, right? They try to control and manage it. So to the average person, they don't really see much of anything other than her overhand washing. Her hands would really be dry and red,
cracked and bloody
chapped.
Almost.
But other than that, right, it's an invisible illness. Like
when we talk about the fact of, when you have a sickness like cancer, or you're in the hospital, I've been in myself, people flock to you, bringing you dinner. They do, they came, when I was in the hospital, they came to a house and cleaned our yard up. When you have a mental illness like OCD or any, people go the other direction, and they're afraid, and not to criticize anybody that did that, because they just don't know, and they don't understand.
They don't want to bother you. They don't want to burden you. They know you're having struggles, and they don't know what to do, and they tend to stay away, which unfortunately is not helpful. It's isolating. And our daughter couldn't go to Girl Scouts for the longest time. She actually stopped dancing when she was 11 because the fears were so bad. She had very unreasonable fears around cigarettes. So if there was a cigarette on the ground and someone touched it, then their shoe became contaminated. And then if that shoe touched something else, it became contaminated. And it got to the point where that's when we were contaminated. She actually couldn't touch her dog for a couple months because of us touching the dog and these incidences. And she loves her dog. She's working as a dog trainer this summer right now. That's her passion.
She couldn't touch us. She couldn't touch anything. It was she ended up on the couch, and that was, for me, that was the hardest thing of all. Not to, as a dad, as a parent, when your child is coming to you crying, screaming, angry, whatever it is, and you can't grab them and go, it's okay. It's, and give them a hug and say, we're right here for you. That was probably the most heart-wrenching thing for me.
Yeah.
As I say, through all this, as you guys have learned more and found, found ways to kind of deal with it, did you guys have any answers to what started this with her, or is it still just kind of a mystery? And
so obsessive compulsive disorder, it has a genetic component. It can be triggered by life stressors, but there's no known, particular cause that can affect it. So she obviously had it was showing signs earlier. Look, I didn't see that until it had gotten severe, but it just like some people get cancer or heart disease or diabetes and things. Unfortunately, there's no known reason or whatever, right, for it to happen. But, identifying what it was kind of the key in getting help. Having the therapist that specialized in OCD
that's a big part. If I was to tell anybody anything, is if you get a therapist, they have to know OCD. They really need to know the exposure response prevention therapy, or ERP therapy. It's very important because that's kind of like the gold standard for recovery. That's how our first daughter got past it, and I think we're doing the same thing with our second daughter. I think she's getting there with it.
Let's talk a little bit about what you guys are doing today. You mentioned the podcast and some coaching, but if there's somebody that's listening to this episode and they're like, yeah, I'm completely resonating with this, and they want to learn more about what you guys are doing, where can they learn more about this? Let's talk a little bit. You've got the website invisiblewheelchair.com, and sounds like you're coaching, you're podcasting. What's all going on in that space?
Well, the invisiblewheelchair.com is the OCD anxiety podcast, and it's got a lot of resources. I've interviewed, I don't know how many, probably 30 or so different therapists, a lot of them specializing in OCD. So there's resources up there. We also have our other website is the focusedhealthyfamily.com, or that's our Gina and I's
business together, where we've worked one-on-one with families, and we also do parent communication workshops, because that's such an important factor in all of this. We realize that things like anxiety affect the entire family, and that we realize that a lot of times you go and get a kid help and they're only being addressed, the child is the only one being addressed, and how important it is to help the family. And through our struggles and trying to find resources and all the scrambling we had to do, we realized we wanted to be able to provide that for other families who are going through issues, and to kind of help give them resources, be support, help coach them, and kind of also direct them to some other resources that can be helpful. And so that's kind of how we got into this, because our journey, just really wanting to help other families who are dealing with these things and not getting answers from other places. And
I guess to me, the biggest point of what we do is, even in telling this story, and we've told it probably 100 times, it feels like, but I think it's really important to be able to show other people hope, because when we were in the midst of this and we were in the worst of it, I looked for any crack of hope I could find, any little smidgen of it. The moment, that I can remember one. It was really strange sometimes how it happened, but there was a one time where our daughter seemed to come out of the OCD. She was in a rage and come out of it crying, and the OCD went away and it was only for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, to be honest with you, where she just broke down. We were able to hug her and hold her and talk to her. And it gave me the bit of hope I needed to keep going, because that, like I said, that was, to me, the toughest thing to have to know. There was so much time when it just felt like, oh my God, we're never going to get past this. We're never going to have her back as our daughter. Is she ever
going to function again? It kind of robbed her of years of her childhood. And to this, she's 19 now, and she doesn't have a lot of memories of this time period. I think any kind of anxiety can really mess with your memory. And so many of these things are kind of a blur for her. But having that hope for her dog was what kind of propelled her forward. She wanted to be with her dog, and that motivated her. In fact, things got really bad when she was 11. And that summer, her cousins were coming down from out of state, and we were going to go. My sister does a kids camp. She has a dog training business, and so she does this week-long camp for kids, learning all about dogs and different businesses and things that incorporate dogs. And so she wanted to do that. So that gave her motivation to do that. So finding, knowing what their interests are can make a big difference, and having something to look forward to.
Yeah.
And we tell the worst part of the story, but to know that she did a lot of hard work in therapy. We did diet changes, and we had to use medication, and we've done all kinds of things to get her the help. And
she's thriving. I mean, OCD is not really a curable kind of disorder, but it is a manageable one. And that's another message we try to get out to people is that, yeah, it seems it's rough, but like I said, she's managing her life right now. She's living a fairly normal life, but she still has some issues with things. She still has, I kind of call it little quirky kind of things and stuff that
certain things she avoids and fears. She still doesn't, cigarette butts on the ground are still difficult for her, and she avoids them.
But she's living a life. She is.
She's actually working this summer as a dog trainer, living with a friend 3 hours away from home, and functioning and driving.
You would ask this 10 years ago if we would have never imagined that,
possible.
because it just didn't seem like that was going to be a possible thing. So
right. And you talked about just looking for hope, and I think so many of us that deal with mental health issues, I had my battles with depression, and I was the same way. Every day I would wake up and I just wanted a sliver of hope, like you said, just something to let me know that this is going to be okay and that I'm not alone, especially in this. So for you guys as a couple, do you find that it's strengthened your relationship as you've gone through this? Because I imagine there was probably some difficult times.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean,
we've kind of co-parented throughout the years. Don started his own business, and I work part-time, and we've kind of juggled our schedules. So we've both been very involved with our kids.
We went through,
and because through all this, we kind of had to do a lot of tag teaming, especially the years where things were flared up. I'd come home from work and he'd fill me in on what had happened, and then he'd go off to do what he had to do. And so yeah, communication was key, in communicating with it. So, and it's brought us together doing this as a business. We've just about 3 years now we've been doing this together, working with families. So it has, because it can tear people apart. And there were times when because one of the things you have with any couple parents that I see it a lot is one believes they know the route, the other one believes they know the route to healing, or one believes and knows and understands what's going on with the child, what mentally is going on with the child, and the other parent just doesn't believe it. Just doesn't think. She thinks they're fake. A lot of times it's the dad. I don't mean to be prejudiced, but they just don't believe, because a lot of times these kids that are dealing with these disorders, whether it's OCD or an anxiety of any sort, they're very intelligent kids. And the one parent a lot of times will think, well, they're smart, they should be able to get through this, So you have that kind of dynamic happening. That's what can split somebody apart. And I don't think we've ever, there's times when she's thought she's knew the better way, but we always found a way to get to an agreement or a way to do it. And I counted on Gina a lot because of her. She's in the medical field, I guess you'd say, or that. Yeah. And even though I didn't work specifically in mental health, that crosses the board of all kinds of illnesses anyhow. So I had a little bit of knowledge and experience in my training in school from that. So
the other big part is she had the mother's heart. That was the thing that led us, was her heart. She was the one that brought compassion into it, that didn't allow me to be too military, and that was what was really cool about it is, she guided from there instead of from here.
And we helped each other whenever, even now with our youngest, if we're just drained and exhausted, we're like, Tag, you're it. I can't do this tonight. I need you to take care of it. And so we we helped each other out. There were times when we didn't agree and we were frustrated with each other. I mean, we didn't have a lot of time for each other, as far as doing things together as a couple for a long time. I remember, gosh, I don't know how long ago this was, when we finally ate dinner and we had time to do something afterwards.
The house was quiet, or something.
And our youngest was old enough to be busy, and it's oh my gosh, this is what an evening looks like, because we had so many years we didn't have that opportunity.
What's going to happen?
The shoe. The other was the waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Going to drop, yeah.
Well, you guys are definitely an inspiration, I think, because I know so many parents that their children have, whether it's depression or anxiety or any other type of, medical or mental health related issue. And it could definitely I've seen it drive wedges in families and kind of splinter to families. So to know that you guys were able to, stay strong and get through this together and kind of balance each other out I think it's going to be, it's an inspiration to me. And I imagine, and I'm, and I haven't gone through what you've gone through, and it's still inspiring to me. So if we've kind of shared some links, but if somebody wants to get a hold of you, let's go ahead and let them know the websites again and social media. I see you have some social media links on at least on the podcast website, but where can people find you guys? focusedhealthyfamily.com. And like I said, the invisiblewheelchair.com.
And we have Focused Healthy Family Facebook page. In fact, what we've been doing lately is some based on the communication workshop. That's a 6-week workshop that we're due, and we're going to be doing again in the fall. We've been doing 20-30-minute free introductory workshops on our Facebook page, doing Facebook Lives to give people an idea of what is involved in the communication workshop, doing some role play and some examples from that. So we have that going on.
Yeah.
And our website's got more information about contacting us. It's got other links and resources, especially to OCD resources and anxiety, just with other books and other places to go for help.
Yeah. And there's an event page on the Focus Healthy Family site. They can find all those dates and stuff that we talked about.
Okay, yeah, and I'll make sure I include those in the description, so anybody listening, don't worry about writing them down. We'll have them available for you. I'm glad to hear that your daughter's doing well, and she's sounds like she's living the life of a night. You said she's 19 now.
Yep, 19,
kind of out and living with a friend. So that I think that goes to say a lot about her strength, but also goes to say a lot about your guys' strength and ability to help her work through this. So kudos to you all, your whole family. And I appreciate you coming on the show. And this podcast is all about letting people know, or at least my goal for this podcast was to let people know they're not alone in whatever their struggles are, and that there is hope. And you guys have shown that. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. We love that you do this podcast and to give people hope. And we've been glad to be here, share our story, to help others.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I appreciate it. This concludes this podcast. We hope you will subscribe if you haven't already. Remember, we would love your comments, or if you have a story to tell, we want to put it up on the podcast. Simply go to invisiblewheelchair.com to do that. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest, we love guests. So simply go to invisiblewheelchair.com and contact us from there. Gina and I are here to help you or your family get to a better place naturally. Simply visit focusedhealthyfamily.com for more information. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Keep tapping and focusing forward for a better way.